At AV&R, our mission is to humanize robotics. We decided to create this podcast series to help you demystify the world of robotics and discover what some of the brightest minds in the field are doing. Welcome to Robotics for All Podcasts by AV&R.
Lee Glazier is Head of Service Integrity at Rolls-Royce. He is a member of the EU AI Experts Group and helps lead the continual development of the artificial intelligence vision at Rolls-Royce. As Lee and his team were building out their vision for AI, they realized there was a huge gap ensuring artificial intelligence is being ethically applied and makes trustworthy decisions. A new standard of ethics and trustworthiness was needed. Lee and his team have created a process framework called the Aletheia Framework to do just this. And when they were done, they believed it was too important to keep to themselves and have released it publicly under a Creative Commons license. In this conversation, we get to hear how Rolls-Royce is using artificial intelligence, how they use this framework to determine if it's safe and trustworthy, and what are some of the dangers if we don't ensure AI is implemented ethically. Hope everyone enjoys the show. Here we go. Hi, Lee. Thanks for joining me today.
That's okay. Great to talk, Michael.
Good. So let's jump right in. So Rolls-Royce, you guys aren't normally known as an AI or artificial intelligence company, but you're with the Aletheia Framework, you're making a big splash and you're going public with it too. So what's the importance of AI for Rolls-Royce?
Wow, it's quite an interesting question because I often get asked, Rolls-Royce, famous even for cars, which we don't make and haven't done for a very long time, but for jet engines and other complex technologies, but mainly looking at equipment. So AI is something that we've used and advanced analytics for decades, but it's generally around support, so supporting our engineers to help them do a better job, analysing data, and probably the most advanced and mature area, again, over several decades that we've used AI and advanced analytics is in our engine health monitoring. Absolutely fundamental to one of our biggest revenue streams as part of that. But around our services, monitoring the health of engines, it's absolutely fundamental. Not under normal circumstances, non-pandemic, in the sky at any one time on average there are 3,000 Rolls-Royce engines, and we're taking data off those engines whilst they're in the sky flying, bringing the data down to the ground and analysing them. You can't do that with just humans, not with that vast amount of data that's streaming through the systems. So advanced analytics, including AI, is what we use to gain insights from that data as to the health of all of those 3,000 engines flying, and in total over 11,000 engines that are hooked up to the health management system.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned you guys have been using data analytics and AI for a long time, and now you're coming out with the Aletheia Framework, and it's really quite interesting. So maybe let's take a step back and let's talk about what is the Aletheia Framework, and then maybe we could talk about why now and why it's important. But let's start with what is it?
The Aletheia Framework is quite simply a framework that we developed for our own internal use to ensure that when we develop and deploy AI into our business, it's done ethically. A very simple framework that pretty much anybody could use. You don't need to have a PhD in artificial intelligence to be able to fill it in. And by adopting the principles, providing the evidence that the Aletheia Framework asks for, sign off then that we're confident that the deployment of the AI will be ethical.
So you're right, it is quite simple. So I've got your AI Aletheia Framework cheat sheet in front of me, and it fits on one sheet of paper and very, very easy to understand. You talked about ethics, so I mean, intuitively, it's easy to explain or to understand why ethics is so important, and you guys decided to go public with it. What was the idea behind that? Why go? It started as an internal tool. Why did you guys feel it was important to tell everyone that ethics is important in AI and take a lead role in that?
Yeah, it's one of those almost unintended consequences of what we developed. When I went out to research what was already around that I could use, hopefully almost lift and shift into our internal business, what was a big surprise was, although there was a lot of guidance around telling you what ethics you should consider in creating an AI ethics framework, we couldn't find anything that was something that we could proceduralize. So there was a lot around the what, but not necessarily much around the how, which is what is needed there to proceduralize an ethics framework. We then, after I'd created, by working with lots of people and getting inputs, created this framework. We sent it out to some of the big tech companies, to our peer industry, to ask them to, match it up against what they'd got and give us some feedback. And all we kept getting back was, this is far more advanced than we've ever seen. We haven't got anything that's so aligned with proceduralization that we could compare it with. You've got something that's quite unique, which was a big shock. And basically our chief exec said, well, AI ethics framework isn't our core business. If we've got something that is unique, let's give it away. So we did. Some of the motivation for that was to let the regulatory bodies realise that we are serious about doing this ethically. The regulatory bodies are themselves looking at what sort of requirements should be regulated around the use of AI. So to be able to show them that we're serious, we're quite happy to work with them. We're not in competition or anti-regulation. We see that as an absolutely fundamental part of keeping our industry safe and compliant. So releasing this to hopefully help the world deliver AI, which is extremely beneficial to humanity, but to deliver it in an ethical way and also in a regulated way, was something that motivated the release of the Aletheia Framework. It's very early days, so we're quite happy and would encourage feedback, so it can be improved for the good of everybody, which is why it was released under Creative Commons license.
Yeah. Here in Canada, we love to watch American politics, right? So, the social impact of AI and some of the news, I guess the news feeds or the hot topics of the day, revolve around some of the big tech companies. And so it's I don't know if I'd say it's surprising or alarming to hear that, when you guys started thinking about this and you went out to the industry, just the infancy of some of the frameworks out there, or if there was frameworks around the AI, considering the impact that it's having right now. But, maybe I take some solace in knowing it is early days, and I'm happy to see that, there is corporations such as Rolls-Royce taking a lead stance to come up with these frameworks and encourage taking everyone to take a step back, and while they're making wild amounts of money, hey, what is the impact that we're having here, and how should we be implementing some of this stuff for really benefiting the people that are hooked up to these systems. So, we won't go into anybody's dirty laundry so much, but I have to ask, as a report card for the world right now and how we're implementing AI, I think there's a lot of people, pioneers, and they're going out there and they're just trying things. But what would you give maybe we can circle back another day and see if the report card has improved. But what would you give us as a grade for now that you've developed your framework and went out to industry? Could we get a passing grade right now for the AI implementation, or are we darker days?
I think most of the people I talk to, I think I would say everybody I've spoken to outside of Rolls-Royce, and obviously inside Rolls-Royce, but outside of Rolls-Royce, wants to do AI ethically. I wouldn't have any dirty laundry from my experience that I could expose from personal talking to the industry. So I think everybody wants to do a good job, an ethical job of deploying AI. So in that case, definitely a pass. In terms of proceduralizing the doing of AI ethically, there's a long journey to go on for everybody. Okay, we've deployed this, but we deployed it in mid-December, so it's only a few months old as a deployment externally from Rolls-Royce. It became part of our procedures over a year ago, formally. But yeah, because the industry wants to do a good job, it is definitely a pass on that. But we've got work to do in terms of proceduralizing it, getting regulations at the right level that gives the compliance necessary, but also gives the freedom to developers to create these wonderful AI wonderful AI capabilities that, done in the right way, are very, very good for humanity.
Yeah, speaking from experience, we're working together on some projects that involve AI, Rolls-Royce and AV&R, and there's a lot to learn in the field, right? So technical knowledge and the proper, the technical use of some of the algorithms is a big body unto itself. So having a roadmap for what are the guideposts to work together on, and what are the important questions to ask is extremely valuable. So and this framework, the team at AV&R is looking at it and using it to help look down the road while we're learning a certain body of work right now, but what elements, what questions are we going to have to answer? It's been a very important part of what we're doing together, and hopefully will contribute to the great success we're going to have together in our projects. So let's unpack it a little bit. You've got three big areas, right? So you have the social impact, you have the accuracy and trust, and you have the governance. And we'll start at the top of the page. And it'd be great to have you tell us, what are each of the different elements, and then within, for example, within social impact, you've identified 5 key elements to go into, and questions you should be asking yourself. So let's start from the high level, and let's define what is the social impact, and maybe we can talk about a couple of the different elements of that, a couple of the 5 key elements, and have some examples.
Sure.
So for you, what is social impact?
Really was looking at, okay, for me, the social impact was really how it could impact humans. That could be in many cases the obvious one that people look at around AI is we're all going to lose our jobs because robots are going to take over, and they won't need humans anymore. So that's one aspect that we look at around social impact. But then there's some more indirect areas of that. So when I deploy an AI in Rolls-Royce, it may or may not have an impact on our own Rolls-Royce resources, but it could equally have an impact on the supply chain, both our customers or our suppliers. So it's important that we look at the sustainability of supply chains as well, which is not necessarily that obvious. And then looking at the benefits of AI, is it going to improve job satisfaction? Is it going to improve the safety of our workforce, the working conditions? So there are all sorts of aspects that one needs to look at around the social impact of deployment of AI. And we've taken the guidance from the global documents, guidelines. There's lots of them from around the world, which is good because therefore they're multicultural. They give wonderful ethics that you should be considering, and they pretty much at a high level all say the same thing, which is very good because there's a body, a very big body saying pretty much the same thing, so you can rely on it. So that gave us the ethics to then create realization principles on how will you realize that ethic within your particular AI project was the step which we've seen pretty much as a USP for the Aletheia Framework. And yeah, to ensure that those ethics then are realized.
Yeah. You know, when I read through these the first time, the way I processed it and kind of my analogy was it's, you know, this is a great guidepost for change management in an organization. You know, how the people, you know, because people are going to ask, you know, how does it impact my job? Will, you know, just like you said at the beginning when you started to define this area, you said, are we going to lose our job? Is this what's going to be the impact to me? And knowing that the decisions are being made ethically helps with that change management and communicating the intent of the system. The other thing that jumped out, you guys mentioned robots, and it was interesting you grouped AI in this AI framework, and you talked about robots in there. But you know, as I thought about it more, you know, one of you start to, when you look at self-driving cars and things like that, one of the things that is coming to fruition, not only, and this is what brings it beyond analytics, not only can AI analyze something and present a potential decision point, it can act on it now too. And that's where the robotics comes in, where some of these algorithms will be acting autonomously through things like robotics and different technology. So it needs to have some ethical principles behind that of what will that robot do and what is the intent of it.
Absolutely, and we're going to move on to the accuracy and trust in a moment, but that is one of the big things that I think gets bad press around AI. It's a black box. How do I know it's what comes out is trustworthy? And that again is probably a USP of the Aletheia Framework, is that we've actually taken on that challenge of how can you create some controls and mechanisms whereby you know whether you can trust the outputs from the AI, and especially when you're looking at some of the autonomous systems that people talk about, even outside of safety. It might be business critical. If I'm going to trust an AI system to order inventory, then I want the right amount and I want the right product to be ordered and delivered to the right place. So business criticality, safety critical, they're areas where trustworthiness is really necessary. And if you take that to a higher level, the general public ethically want to know they can trust AI. So it comes back to social impact again.
Yeah, those two are really tightly entwined together. So what is the intent of all this innovation that everybody's planning? And then the question of how can I trust it, right? So I can see this getting into some of the procedural stuff, and at the top framework, or the top point of that accuracy and trust, is safety that you have here. And maybe talk a little bit about how rigorous, and what are some of the framework that you need to, how do you test that this is safe? If you're dealing with, let's say, a neural network that you don't understand how it's the workings of it, you give it input data for training, but you can't necessarily hope to have all the possible inputs in a short period of time. So how do you stress test it? How do you validate that it is safe?
It's a big challenge. It's a massive challenge, and there are so many facets to the question that you've posed, which is some further work as well that Rolls-Royce has kicked off. But let's talk about where we are, and specifically the Aletheia Framework, and then maybe digress and talk about some of the challenges that we're working on in more detail. We have within Rolls-Royce some extremely comprehensive software standards for creating software that are there for safety critical software. So systems that are part of jet engine flying are really safety critical, and we have some extremely rigorous regulations that we have to comply with and gain approval from regulators. And then that's the same for our competitors. It's the airline industry. It's the same in our defence business, our power systems business, our nuclear propulsion generators. They are all driven by a safety case. So we are quite experienced both in terms of complexity, longevity, in working in a safety critical context. So in terms of the stress testing, as you called it there, we do that both on mechanical systems, electronic systems, control systems. So those are, what we would call ex post, to use a term, ex ante, to use a term. They're there. What adds to the challenge from AI is some of those systems, we rely on them to continue to learn as more data is available, and they can themselves mutate, and worst case become biased. So those are the additional challenges. So what we recognize is that if you were to analyze the coefficients on a neural network, for example, they may change 5 minutes later after you've analysed them. So it's very important that you do those sorts of things, but you've then got to accept that after deployment, some of those things may change, and you've got to continually be able to assure yourself that you're still in a situation where the criticality is not going to go unsafe. So we have controls and mechanisms that continually look at the system to identify whether there's been a mutation that's going to take it into an unsafe situation. And if that happens, then we can revert to some pre-existing safety faults, or even switch the system off, alarms to humans to identify there's been a malfunction within the system. And that again is the USP that we've brought into this, which we've not found anywhere else, where the black box problem that academia is looking at solving is something that we've put in there, and we solve it by not looking inside the black box, but looking at comparing input versus output, and we do that with what we call the 5 parallel checks that are running, and that actually comes from a non-AI safety critical complex analytical system that's been approved by regulators. So complex, we could call it hardwired, a very complex analytical system that's safety critical, has got these 5 checks on it that's continually looking for any malfunctions within hardwired, call it deterministic system. But being able to lift that and move it into AI and have it there as an ex post system running that's looking at it, assuring that the AI has not malfunctioned. Now, AI is not used within a safety critical system yet. There are roadmaps among the regulators to go there, and we're aligning ourselves very much with that. But outside of a safety critical system, they're still extremely valuable to look at assuring the trustworthiness of the outputs from an AI. And in a non-safety critical system, especially if you're in a business critical system where you're ordering inventory, for example, then knowing that you've got this control running is extremely valuable. Then going to the future and where we're working next. So we kicked off some research in the biomedical science field. So, for example, question, how do biomedical scientists identify there's been a mutation amongst genetics or within the brain? Even better, having our neural networks for AI based on the functioning of the brain. How does biomedical science identify there's been a malfunction within the brain, and how could they be used within AI in industry, if I can use that term? Sure, yeah. Are there any techniques that we could bring into our field? So we've been working with some biomedical scientists, looking at genetic mutation identification and further research continuing on. One of the interesting things that did come out of that was within the identification of genetic mutation, there is something extremely similar to the Rolls-Royce 5 checks philosophy, which is sitting outside the black box of genetics, if I can use that phrase, looking at exactly the same way, almost input, output, fit, form, function, that sort of thing, which was a validation of our approach, an unexpected validation, but also we're continuing to look inside the black box of genetics to compare that with the black box of AI. And beyond that, one of the big things is the data itself. You referred to training data, test data, the continual use of production data. So we've created a white paper looking at how would we proceduralize the quality assurance of AI development. And that's another quite exciting field because it doesn't really exist a quality assurance process that we could proceduralize in Rolls-Royce. So again, we're developing one. There's interest already from industry around our leadership in that area as well.
Great. Yeah, it is the next after safety, then it talks about transparency and traceability, right? So, yeah. and that plays into what you were just talking about in the sense, to proceduralize it, you need to understand a little bit what you're dealing with and have ways to tease out and analyze what's going on inside of some of these networks. And I don't know that what I get from talking with you, you guys know really well what you're in control of, right? So you talked about the safety systems and you've been flying people around the globe for many, many years. So you have a well-developed and robust safety system. And now you're looking at gradually and systematically bringing AI in to help in different areas where it will benefit people in a positive way. Now, in order to measure that, you don't necessarily have all the answers, right? So you're saying, well, we've got this framework that helps us bring, and test and try things, but we know what we don't know. So So if, maybe there's some people here listening that on this list have some new techniques or new tools that would be interested in doing business with you guys and helping you on this journey. And I'm imagining that transparency and traceability and analyzing some of these networks is a pretty big topic. So is there any specific elements that you'd say, if anybody's listening and they have a solution that is out there, that they should give you a call, Lee?
Yeah, absolutely. We believe we're at the forefront of these sorts of governance systems of AI, and more people are developing software solutions that can help you with the transparency and the traceability and identifying data anomalies and those sorts of things. And we welcome people to give us a call and let's talk about how we could do that in a more systematic way. And that's going to continue developing and is absolutely wonderful. What we need to be able to do in the meantime, of course, is assure ourselves that we do understand the provenance of the algorithms, and within our industry, a regulated industry, we're quite used to having to hold on to simulation capabilities, the data that drove simulations for absolutely years and years and years. People are astounded when we say that our engine health monitoring data, although we have regulatory requirements on how long we keep it, we actually keep it forever. We have it all. And that provides all sorts of useful things in the future that you never dreamt you would ever need it for. But now we can actually use decades old data to help us create AI models, right, and train AI models from decades old data. So that sort of transparency and traceability we're quite comfortable with. It's not necessarily right down to the encoded level of algorithms that we're used to, but we are used to holding on to the algorithms, for example, and archiving them, and being able to reproduce years after the initial use of them, be able to recreate the use of them in the future, even though hardware, operating systems, etc., will have moved on and even become obsolete. That's those capabilities we are quite used to being able to have to recreate as part of any regulatory investigation. So traceability and transparency is something that we're quite mature in our processes around. But as we move into AI, yes, please, if you've got software capability that can help us in that area, we're always ready to discuss.
Yeah. There's, with new engines, new maybe data points that, as you did different techniques for gathering this data, come out. Maybe talk a little bit about, how do you control things not going off track? And do you guys look at windows of data, or are you using, if you've got decades old data, how do you guys figure out, what is applicable at any moment in time? Is there is that through some of the rigorous testing that you guys have done? Is it how do you know, for somebody that's, let's say got a big data set, is there some rules of thumb for gauging what is pertinent to some of these algorithms, and how to know when things are going off track?
We use the most appropriate data, which may be old, may be brand new, and that's rule of thumb. That's generally associated with the particular age of the component or system that
Yeah.
you're wanting to create an AI for. In terms of knowing whether something has gone wrong, that's where the Rolls-Royce 5 checks come in. And they are designed specifically to tell you something has gone wrong. Some of those can be simple sense checks. So if I give an example, an engine flies, the engine therefore has got older. If the analytics says the engine has got younger after a flight compared with previous flights, then you know something's gone wrong. So that would be a simple sense check. And in one of our engine health monitoring systems, for example, there are 14 sense checks.
Yeah. Looking
at, as you and I would as a human, we would go, that's wrong. That is absolutely impossible. That cannot have happened. You know, if you were looking at the analytics of a car journey and it told you that it had done 50 kilometers in 2 seconds, you would know it was wrong. Whatever the analytics had done, something had gone wrong. Yeah. So there are those sorts of sense checks that are quite easy to build into a system, and they can be just running continuously. And those are the sorts of techniques we use, and they're very mature, to identify that there has been either bias, malfunction, or mutation occurring within the system.
Yeah.
And in terms of overhead, they're very cheap in terms of compute power. And you don't actually have to run them continuously forever. They can be running every 10 minutes, every half hour, dependent on the volatility of what you're looking at. So those are the sorts of techniques that we've used. And again, they come from our safety critical industry, but you can apply them onto any AI system.
Yeah. Maybe I didn't ask the question elegantly because, I was just thinking about the problem set that you guys had, right? So, weather patterns change. So even though you have this huge set of old data, there's no guarantee that at any particular moment it's the same set of circumstances. To where you are in the world flying, the engine that you're flying, and so it's quite a large problem set. So it's really a really interesting problem to try and wrap your head around. And so that's kind of the thread that I was my mind was going down when I was asking that question, and it's really impressive.
Let me answer that then. Let me answer that because it's an absolutely fascinating field that AI, big data is starting to enable. So we have some extremely capable simulation techniques within our engineering department. So, basically simulating the laws of physics, in some areas quite chaotic laws of physics. So if you take that, effectively a digital twin that our engineering department have, then bring in the big data that we've got from actual engine health monitoring, so it's as flown, if you will, and then bring in environmental data into that, plus our own physical test, and a simulation is effectively a virtual test. When you start to bring all of that together, using AI capability, which is crunching through that extremely fast, enabled by high performance computing, you're really into a space where as flown, we can bring in as maintained, we can actually bring in as manufactured real data, the actual size and material composition of the components, bring all of that together, then you're into a place where you can actually start to do scenario planning on what happens if the weather patterns change, and that really is enabling the sorts of things that you're talking about there to a massive scale, way beyond what we've been able to do in the past, and that enables us to optimize things for efficiency, for safety, for performance, and absolutely make a completely, far better product than hopefully our competitors.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's you're almost limited by your imagination in what we are capable of doing now.
Yeah, no, and that's interesting. We have a much smaller problem set in automation, right? So, what we often try and do is limit the number of possibilities that can happen so that you can zero in on a solution that will work repeatably every day, right? So, often it's changing a lot now, but you would put up fences around the robots and not allow interaction. Well, number one, for safety, but also it limits the problem set that can happen. Now, with collaborative robots, mobile robots, so you're letting everything out of the cage. So in automation, we're forced to think about these more than we had to in the past. What are all the different possibilities? There's new possibilities coming up, and so it's pretty interesting to hear and open up our imagination as to how you guys approach that, where you can't put a cage around an airplane and say, okay, I'm only going to deal with these problems. I'm going to block it from everything that can happen.
Yep.
Now, if we jump into the governance, so this is and we did a little bit science fiction when we talk about AI. For sure, the governance is an interesting topic. Some of the pessimistic when we talk about general AI. What if AI gets smart enough that it looks at what's going on in the world and decides, oh, I better shut off the human race. So the governance, when we talk about the big thing, and can we trust this? How do we? What is it there for? And is there a back door to who has the keys and decides if this should be shut down or not, right? And so it's quite a juicy topic if we wanted to go down the science fiction fact. But in your world, in the procedural world, what are some of the key points of the governance that are important for you guys, and that you believe are important for people looking to bring AI into their business?
Yeah, I think there are probably three areas around governance. There's one around the governance of the data. So that's obviously personal data, human data. There's export control. There's the confidentiality, and they sort of go around. Some of that's regulatory. Some of that might be commercial contracts about what you can and can't do with data. So there's that, and in there, there's the cyber issue as well, making sure that you've got good protection of the data. So we've been having to do that for obviously years as we've been doing analytics. So we already have in place procedures around those looking after the data, if I can call it that, being ethical in the use of the data.
Yeah.
But they've been put in here so that the Aletheia Framework can be standalone if people don't have already those in place. One of the biggest areas around governance is the accountability. You can't take an AI system to court if it does something malicious. You can only take humans to court. So understanding the accountability, who's accountable for the outcome of an AI system, and declaring it, and making sure that the person who is accountable for the outputs of the AI system understand what that means, and therefore what due diligence needs to be in place around that is important, and that relies heavily on the risk. We use failure mode effect analysis in a big area of what could be the consequences if this AI system did go wrong, and absolutely vital for that person who's signing off the accountability to
Right.
understand the risks, which is the final part of the governance. But around the accountability and who's responsible for creating the analytics, which is often a team, and it might be a team that extends outside to third parties. Your AI could be a system of AIs,
Yep.
so it becomes quite complex. And that's one of the big areas around the governance, is the accountability and the responsibility, but based on an extremely robust risk assessment, which we're starting to look more and more around quality assuring AI, which will be a big part of that, will be around the FMEA, failure rate effect analysis, which is an extremely robust risk analytical system for complex systems like even AI.
Right. Yeah, I can see a lot of complaint to that. There's the source of the data that could be, there is accountability there. If that data becomes corrupted, so there's somebody that has to be responsible for that. The people that developed the algorithms, and then the people that are running the algorithms too, right? You guys may not have developed them, but you've maybe had a third party deliver a set of algorithms or models, and then it becomes your responsibility to run and maintain them. I can quickly see that you'd be chasing your tail in circles, trying to pinpoint where did something go wrong in at any moment in time.
Yep.
Now, for export control, is there an easy way to, the data I think is easy in terms of export control. Have you guys come up with an easy way to decide, well, the models that are themselves, do they become export controlled? Is there an, again, we're in Canada, we like to talk about the US a lot, but our neighbors to the south, when we look at the amount of money they invest in their defense industry and in the military, and as commercial entities, it's not always easy to share information and data, but at least it's easy to draw a line around what is commercial and what is not. And then if you take, say, commercial data and then apply the model into a military application, does that become controlled, and are you allowed to use it elsewhere, right? So there's a lot of, as a business, there's a lot of implications to that, the export control. Have you guys established any guideposts around what Rolls-Royce, your stance on how these models and these coefficients you manage in an export control environment?
We have processes that we follow. It's not easy.
Yeah.
There are some areas which we have got rules that define what would and wouldn't be export controlled, which makes that particular area easy. But as we move more and more into new technologies, it's often less well defined. So any one of our digital projects, which obviously includes artificial intelligence, the data, the technology, the information is assessed by an export control expert. If it goes outside of the pre-existing rules that define what the tram lines are, green or red. So yes, we have a very, very well-oiled, familiar process that we follow, but it does include a human having a look at what you're doing to assess whether that will or will not comply with the export control regulations, which are not all the same around the whole world. So it's a very, very complex subject. And I think some people, it puts them off, therefore, advancing technology, because it is such a difficult thing to get your head around.
Yeah.
So we make sure we get our head around it, and we do it compliantly, and we continue talking to the global regulators to make sure that we're aligned with their views as these new technologies become available to us. So get your head around it. That enables you to continually advance in a compliant way.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a big fan of the open source ecosystem, and people contributing to help move topics forward. And AI has such a rich ecosystem, and a lot of corporations have released, just like you did with the Aletheia framework. They've made it public, a lot of the algorithms and stuff like that. And I'm curious, how do you guys, let's take an algorithm like, I don't know if you've heard of YOLO, where it's image-based recognition for, identifying objects in a field of view. And there's a publicly available trained models that are open source that you can leverage, but you don't necessarily have the I guess the transparency of what was trained in there, because that model has evolved over time. But on one hand, it could greatly advance by starting with this open source model. It could greatly advance and move ahead at a much faster rate. Let's say the testing and development and integration of some of the AI, or you have to face a decision where you say, you know what, I need to start from scratch because I don't have the transparency. I don't have the necessarily the trust. I can't validate the trust of where did that come from. So I'm assuming that you guys must come into those situations often, and
all the time.
In your world, I guess where I'm trying to go, where do you sit on which side of the line? Are you more forced to take the safe approach, or is there an avenue where you're, I guess, like a test environment that you're allowed to play with that?
We accept that open source technologies are extremely beneficial, and it's advantageous if you can use them. So we have methodologies to enable us to use them and even embed them within technologies that we forward on. So there are lots of things that you have to be aware of, but the two biggies there is the licensing. So we have experts looking at the licensing around open source, whether we can reuse it, what we have to do in terms of declarations, etc. if we do reuse it, and the other is export control. Some open source technologies are classified formally with certification from regulatory bodies. That's really helpful if that's the case. Some aren't, in which case then our export control experts will look at what is contained within that particular open source technology, including things like encryption, etc., which can add a dimension to it. And we'll be able to identify what the classification either is or would be, and whether we can or cannot embed it within a technology that we're potentially going to be re-exporting as part of a capability. So yeah, all of the above, but we try, certainly we accept the benefits of using some of the open source technologies and do in a compliant way.
Do you see a day where, let's say, engine OEMs are sharing data in order to advance some of the different techniques, whether it be in manufacturing or safety systems, or are we still early?
I don't know. I really don't, Michael. There's obviously massive advantage in your data. I think there'll be occasions where some is and some isn't. Dependent on the commercial advantage and the intellectual property contained within somebody's data.
Absolutely.
But
there's probably no definitive answer to that. It depends.
And it won't be an answer. It won't be an answer from me.
Sure. And it touches on one of the challenges that we face as a company too. And when we're looking, we think we have a lot of robots out in the field and stuff like that, but the truth is, the volume of data is maybe not that big, right? And in any particular one customer, maybe it's an okay data set, but it's not, necessarily rich enough to maybe definitively go through and check all the boxes. So that's where, working in some of the more niche areas, that data sharing could be advantageous to a number of people, or even a necessity to proving a technology. So that's one of the conundrums that we deal with on a daily basis when we're looking at these things. If it means a safer algorithm or a more robust algorithm, but you have to mix data, you can maybe prove it's trusted, but there's two different sources. So the legality and the logistics of working through that is quite complex. And our hope is one day that there is some transparency, or an avenue to through maybe some of the transparency techniques, being able to keep everybody's data confidential, but leverage some of it to help and advance some of the technologies. So that's an interesting one for companies of our size, trying to make an impact and trying to serve our customers better and do all those beneficial things with the tools that we have to play with.
Yeah.
It's not there's no definitive answer there, but at the end, the only definitive thing is you can't do it alone, right? At the end of the day, working together on these things, it's critical. We don't make engines. We build some tools and techniques to help you guys make engines. So that transparency and trust on both sides is critical. And the framework that you guys have put together, I have to say, it's easy, it's simple, fits on one piece of paper. So coming to the table and working through those, it creates a great atmosphere that everyone knows what's on everyone's mind, and you can start having those discussions. So Lee, it's been really good to have you kind of take a deep dive into some of these things and explain it to us. And like you said, it is early days, so I hope that you guys get some great momentum out of this, because not just for Rolls-Royce, but for other organizations looking at it's a great change management tool, and it definitely helps with some of the news cycles that we see and the concerns that people have, how to implement AI and demystify what is AI and how it can help us. Because for sure these tools are powerful, and as bad as some of the news cycles we hear, the negative things, elections being influenced and stuff, take that and amplify it for the good, and it can be just as good as it is bad. We love to focus on the negative, but the good that it's doing out in the world is extremely important for everybody.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, they're wonderful things that you've said, and please, as your team, I know you're looking at implementing within your team, feedback, any improvements. Some of the language is very, very much Rolls-Royce industrial language, because it was created for our own internal use originally. So even simplifying the language and feedback on that is important. So yeah, thank you, and please feedback to us so that we can all learn off each other.
Oh, absolutely. I can see quite a few good conversations coming out of this.
Yeah, great.
Thank you, Lee, and have yourself a great day.
Pleasure. Same to you. Thank you, Michael. Bye-bye.
So this concludes the episode of Robotics for All podcast by AV&R. If you don't want to miss another single episode, don't forget to subscribe to our show in your favorite podcast app. Thank you very much, everyone, and we'll talk again soon.